In today's restorative class, we're going to be talking about core engagement and breath. I've been getting a lot of questions lately about how do I properly engage my core. Core engagement is more than just muscle engagement. It really does involve breath and breath pattern. Breath and muscle engagement are intricately related. If you haven't already watched the foundations videos, especially the first two, which deal with pelvic floor and breath and neutral spine, I highly suggest you go and check those two videos out. I go into a lot of detail there. We're going to talk about it in this as well, but that's a shorter class and you might like to have a bit of a shorter explanation because we're going to get into a little bit of information here. So when I talk about core engagement, I like to refer to my core as a house. There is the pelvic floor, which is the foundation or floor to my house. There are the walls, which are my internal and external obliques, as well as my transversus abdominis muscle. This is a muscle that wraps itself around my waist, and its entire function is to draw around the waist and the spine. It doesn't really do much for flexion or side bending or rotation. It really is there to kind of hug around the center of the body to support your trunk. I also think of my little multifidi muscles, which are these little muscles that run up between my vertebrae as the chimney of the house. And then finally the roof of the house, which is my diaphragm. We don't always think of the diaphragm as being a really important part of core engagement, but it is, because not only is the diaphragm a muscle, it's also breath. So the diaphragm is a dome shape, and it lives just underneath the lungs. When I take a breath in, my diaphragm lowers and flattens. That allows for the breath to enter into my lungs. When I exhale, the diaphragm recoils and it pushes the air out of my lungs. Well, the pelvic floor, or the foundation of my house, is also a dome shape. And the diaphragm and the pelvic floor mimic each other in movement. So when the diaphragm draws the air in and it flattens, the pelvic floor is meant to spread wide and flatten on that inhale as well. When I exhale and push the air out, creating the dome shape, my pelvic floor should follow that movement, doming up on the exhale. These are two muscles, or two sets of muscles, that really should be working together. Unfortunately, we get into a place where we can end up with the diaphragm doing one movement and the pelvic floor doing another movement, like when we exhale and bear down on the pelvic floor. They're not working together at that point. They are out of sync with one another, and that's when we can get ourselves into some problems if that pattern is repeated and we don't take the time to learn a more efficient and proper muscle engagement and breath pattern for movement. We can also get into a little bit of trouble if we stop breathing. How often have you been doing an exercise and you just hold your breath until you get to the end of the rep, or the weight is too much and so you hold your breath to try to get through it? When we hold our breath, our diaphragm freezes to a certain degree. It's in a frozen state. It's not going anywhere. It's not going up. It's not going down. Well, our pelvic floor, which is related to the movement of the diaphragm, if we stop breathing, the pelvic floor is going to go into a state of freeze too, which means the musculature that we need to support our movement, the foundation, isn't working. It's in a state of freeze. So we want to continue the breath pattern. Keep the breath cycle going. When we talk about breath in Pilates, we want to breathe into the lungs. And I know that sounds kind of silly. Where else are you going to breathe into but your lungs? That's what they're there for. But stay with me here. We often will breathe either into our bellies, which is often encouraged by yoga practices, to breathe down into the belly, or we breathe up into our chest. So like when you're out for a run and the breath is really high up into the shoulders and the chest, right? That's a lot of exertion breath. In Pilates, we actually want to breathe kind of on the sides of our rib cage. So if you place your hands underneath your armpits and take a breath into your hands, you can see that when I take my breath, my rib cage expands outward. I'm not breathing up into my shoulders, and I'm also not breathing down into my belly. When you belly breathe, it goes against the musculature that we want to strengthen in Pilates. We want the core to be engaged and active on the exhale. And we need it to stay a little active, kind of like white noise in the background. During the exercises, we never want to go from like nothing to something to nothing to something. We want to keep it humming in the background so that way the core is prepared for the movement, or it can stabilize us when we're doing a longer and more continuous movement without completely leaving us without any support whatsoever. So this is a very long preamble. Like I said, we're going to be focusing quite a lot in this class on breath and core engagement, primarily pelvic floor and low abdominals, okay? And as always, or as of lately, this class is pregnancy friendly. I am about 15 weeks along myself, so if you are pregnant or early postpartum, this is actually a great class for you to do in order to find that pelvic floor engagement, which we know is very important during and post-pregnancy. If you feel that you need something underneath your head for a little extra support, you can go ahead and grab a little pillow or a little cloth that you can roll up and place under the head for a little bit of extra support. Otherwise, I will see you on the mat. All right, we are going to start right at the very beginning with our pelvic floor breath. So if you watched the foundational videos, you'll remember that the pelvic floor looks like a diamond shape and it lives at the bottom of our pelvis. So you can think of the pubic bone as being 12 o'clock on a clock face, the tailbone as being 6 o'clock of your clock face, and then your two little sit bones on either side of those bum cheeks as being 3 and 9 o'clock. A clock face is easy to visualize, and it's a pretty good image to use for pelvic floor, which can be pretty mysterious for a lot of people. I'm going to place my hands into a triangle, placing them on my low belly. Fingers towards the pubic bone and thumbs underneath the belly button. I'm going to take my inhale in. Let the pelvic floor widen. As I exhale, I'm going to pull up through the pelvic floor. If I'm thinking of my clock face, I'm pulling the 4 numbers of the clock into the center of the clock. I'm going to inhale and let it release. And exhale, pulling those 4 numbers in toward each other. I'm breathing in through my nose to warm the breath. And I'm breathing out through my mouth because I get a greater engagement on my exhale when I breathe out through my mouth. Try it. Try doing a few through your nose. Let's do another one like that to see how it feels. And now try a couple where you breathe out through your mouth. Let's take that inhale and exhale through the mouth. Do that again. Inhale and exhale. Can you feel how there's a bit more muscle engagement on that exhale? And again, if I'm thinking of my pelvic floor, as I exhale, I'm going to pull up through that clock face, and I can feel my belly come away from my hands a little bit. And as I inhale, I can feel the belly relaxing. Now, like I said in the intro, when we belly breathe like that, it conflicts with the abdominal musculature that we want to strengthen in Pilates. So we breathe into the lungs. If placing your hands here isn't comfortable, if you have a TheraBand that you can wrap around as a reminder, it's nice to have a little feedback like that if you ever forget. So, but I'm just going to place my hands here. And same thing, I'm going to take my inhale, but I'm going to focus my breath into my hands. And I'm going to do that again, focusing the breath into my hands. So you can see that my lungs or my rib cage expands as I inhale. But I'm able to maintain support through my low abdominals. I can still think of pelvic floor engagement here. Inhale as I widen the pelvic floor. And exhale as I pull up through the pelvic floor. Okay, so really important, breath, core, and pelvic floor. They're very intricately related to one another. We're now going to come and have a lie down on our back and talk about a position called imprint. So when I imprint, the act of imprinting is the act of using my musculature to lengthen and flatten my low back against the mat. So everybody has a neutral spine. If we have a natural curvature in the low back, and you can see that I can kind of place my hand fairly, I mean, I've got not a huge amount of space, but I can place my hand underneath my back. Everybody has their own neutral. So yours might be a little bit flatter. It might be much more engaged in that arch. Everybody has their own. But when we talk about imprinting, it's not just about jamming your back into the mat to flatten it or squeezing the bum and tucking under, which I often see from people when they're first learning how to do this. It really is finding that pelvic floor and muscle engagement. So take a moment to find your neutral spine. I'm placing, again, that triangle down on my low abdominals, and I'm just going to rock gently back and forth between my fingers and my thumbs, trying to keep my upper body pretty quiet. So I'm really just staying into the pelvis, and I'll make that movement smaller and smaller to find my neutral pelvis. Then I'm going to take my breath in. I can think of my pelvic floor widening. And as I exhale, I'm going to allow the pelvic floor to start pulling in and up. Let the tailbone roll toward the pubic bone toward the belly button. And my back is naturally going to lengthen and flatten against the mat. But I've done it by engaging my abs, my glutes, and my hamstrings. Very loosey-goosey here. And I'm going to let that go. You could also see that I could talk to you very easily as I did that. There was no breath holding. Let's take another breath in. On the exhale, let the tailbone roll toward the pubic bone. Pull in through those abdominal muscles, that pelvic floor. Let the back flatten. Take a breath in. See if you can maintain it. Exhale. And we'll take an inhale and let it go. And because I wasn't done my movement, but I needed to breathe, I exhaled. It's always about just allowing yourself to live in the breath cycle. Let's do it one more time. Taking a breath in, pelvic floor widening. As I exhale and pull up through my pelvic floor, I'm going to let my tailbone roll toward the ceiling. Pubic bone rolls towards the belly button. I can feel my back lengthen and flatten against the mat. Take a couple of breaths into my lungs. This is one of those examples where we need the muscle engagement down here. If I start belly breathing, I'm going to lose it. That's why I'm breathing into my lungs. One more time. And exhale, I'm gonna let it go. I'm gonna take that into a hip roll now. So hands are gonna come by my side. I'm gonna take a breath in. Pelvic floor widens. Exhale, pulling up through that pelvic floor, letting the tailbone roll to pubic bone. Pubic bone roll to belly button. I am going to turn my glutes on as my pelvis starts to lift off the floor. I'm going to keep rolling up through my spine, just to the base of my shoulder blades. I'm going to take a breath in at the top. And then on the exhale, I'm going to soften my throat, soften my rib cage, melting down. And when I get to that low back, I'm going to take a little breath in and I'm going to exhale and deepen my abdominal connection just a little bit more. And I'm going to let my tailbone relax back into the floor. Do that again. Take a breath in, pelvic floor widens. Exhale, pulling up through that pelvic floor. Then let the tailbone start to roll deep and through those abdominals, rolling through the spine. Glutes turn on as the bum lifts up. They have to support the pelvis. Rolling up to the base of the shoulder blades, not going much higher than this. Breath in. And exhale, softening the throat, softening the rib cage, deepening through the abdominals as I start to roll through that low back. Inhaling and exhaling as needed to release. One more time. I'm just going to cue my breath on this and how I'm breathing, but if you need faster or shorter, faster or a longer breath pattern, do what you need. Take a breath in. Exhale, pulling up through the pelvic floor. Then I'm going to start my movement. Always exhale and then start the movement. Finding the glutes, exhaling, inhaling. Exhaling at the top. Inhale. Exhale, soften. Inhale. Exhale, deepen. Inhale, allow the tailbone to release. So you can see, I breathed quite a bit during that. So it wasn't like this long breath and then I ran out of breath and I had to hold it. I kept breathing throughout. Again, this is why we want to breathe into our lungs and find that wide expansion of the rib cage. And not belly breathe in Pilates because I need those muscles to stay active as I do this continuous movement. We're going to go into our double knee drops from here. Double knee drops are used for many, many reasons. We're going to focus on it for pelvic floor and breath. As I take my inhale, I'm going to let the inner thighs fall away from each other and focus on that pelvic floor. 3 and 9 o'clock are stretching away from each other. As I exhale, I want to pull 3 and 9 o'clock in toward the center of my clock, maintaining my neutral pelvis. Inhale, stretching 3 and 9 o'clock. And exhale, pull 3 and 9 o'clock together. We're going to do it again. I'm going to inhale and let it go open. I'm going to start my exhale before I start my movement. Then my movement. We want to begin the exhale a little less than half a second before we start our movement. That's going to wake the core up to give us the support that we need before we add movement to it. You don't want to rush yourself through an exercise where you're not properly supporting yourself because you're moving so quickly through it. Take your time with the Pilates work. It doesn't make it easier, but it makes you better supported. Let's do it again. We're going to inhale and exhale, bringing the legs together. One more time, inhaling, spreading wide. Start the exhale, then the movement. We're going to go to our single knee drops from here. I'm going to focus just on my leg closest to the camera. So I can imagine just my 3 o'clock opening here. Just my 3 o'clock. And exhale, then pull that 3 o'clock in to the center of the clock. Let's do that again. 3 o'clock spreads wide. and exhale. I'm not letting my knee fall into nothing. I am still supporting from my inner thigh. I am supporting through my opposite oblique. This is another example of why I want to breathe into my lungs. I need my opposite oblique to stay active because otherwise I'm going to roll. So I need to have that humming, that white noise core engagement throughout the exercise. What helps me with that is when I breathe into my lungs, I can set my core up and then it's always just a little active. We're going to do one more time on the right leg and then we'll move on. So my right leg is going to open, which is my leg closest to the camera, or my 3 o'clock. And exhale, pulling up through that 3 o'clock, deepening those abdominals. Moving on to my 9 o'clock leg, letting that leg fall to the side as I take a breath in. I'm going to start my exhale and then add the movement. And again, inhale. Start the exhale, then the movement. Inhale. Exhale, then the movement. Inhale one more time here. And exhale. Good. We're going to take that into our toe taps. Okay, do not just rush to get your legs into tabletop. Take a breath in. Exhale, find that pelvic floor, then bring the leg to tabletop. Let's do that again, shall we? Let's bring that leg down. We're going to take our inhale. We're going to start the exhale. Deepen that exhale as I bring the leg up to tabletop. Let's do that again. Come back down. Find your pelvic floor. Inhaling. Exhale. Then add the movement. Good. We're going to keep the leg in tabletop and we're going to go into our toe taps. I am going to take a breath in. On my exhale, I'm going to toe tap. Inhale my leg back up. Exhale, pelvic floor. Inhale up. So I changed my breath pattern here. Exhale down. And I feel comfortable doing that because my white noise is on. I'm not going from nothing to something, nothing to something. My white noise is active. So as I lower my leg, which is the heavier part of my load, that's where I want the support. That's where I want the exhale. And I'm going to inhale it back up. I'm going to do an exhale to bring my leg back down before the other side. And releasing. Okay, let's do that on the other side. Let's do a couple of breaths where we bring the leg up and we'll relax it down. So we're going to take that inhale. I'm going to start my pelvic floor and exhale, then lift the leg. And then just with control, I'm going to bring it back down. I'm not going to get too fussy about the coming down part for this particular section. Take a breath in. Exhale, finding that pelvic floor. Up. Coming back down. We'll stay up on this next one, taking a breath in. Exhale. Add the leg. And we're going to hold it there. We're going to take a breath in. Exhale. Pulling up through that pelvic floor. Inhaling it back up. Exhale. Then start the movement. Inhale it up. Exhale. Then the movement. Inhale it up. Do you feel like your pelvis is more supported? Do you feel like your spine is a little more supported? One more time. And down. All right, we are going to come on to our hands and knees. Now, I know that in a lot of the classes we move a lot more quickly through exercises, but don't feel that you have to. Those are classes that are, fitness-based, so we do move a little bit more quickly in them. But if you need a little bit more time to do an exercise to set yourself up properly before you begin, take that time. Do what your body needs you to do. We're going to come onto our hands and knees. I like using this position to help people find their core engagement. And now that I'm pregnant, when I let my belly go, you can really see that belly go. So when I take my breath in, I'm going to imagine that I'm giving the baby a hug in, or you can imagine zipping up a pair of jeans from that pubic bone to belly button, a tight pair of jeans where you have to pull the low tummy muscles in. So let's do this together. Let's take a breath in, letting the belly go. And on the exhale, I'm going to pull up through my pelvic floor, giving the baby a hug in. You can see my back doesn't change though. I don't tuck under. Maintain my neutral. I'm going to inhale and let it go. Exhale. So we are belly breathing here because I want you to feel the core engagement against gravity. This is a good place to be able to feel it. And you can feel just how much abdominal work you need on that exhale to engage those abs. It's a little more breath than you think you need. I'm going to do one more time here. Now, I'm going to keep giving my baby a little hug in. I want you to keep your jean zipper active, and we're going to move into those kneeling hinges. As I go back, I'm going to envision a triangle from my two little sit bones and my tailbone, my 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 12 o'clock. As I hinge back in space, I'm going to widen the corners of that triangle away from each other. And I'm going to come back over. I'm going to inhale as I go back, favoring the widening of the pelvic floor. And I'm going to exhale and feel a little bit of engagement through that pelvic floor as I come back up. I want that little bit of humming in my low abdominals, because otherwise I'm just going to be hanging out in my back the whole time, which is not safe and not comfortable. This is an example where you need that humming in the core as you do this, but also try to let the pelvic floor open. This is where it starts getting a little weird anatomy-wise and in Pilates, where we ask you to spread some muscles wide while keeping others engaged. Well, let's do a couple more. Exhale. One more time, inhale. And exhale. All right, I'm going to bring my legs a little bit closer together. We're going to add a little bit of load to this work. So I'm going to take a breath in, keep my core, let's begin again. Let's take a breath in and let the belly release. Let's exhale, pull up through that pelvic floor, find those abdominal muscles. Now here's where the white noise stays active. I'm going to take a breath into my lungs now. And on my exhale, I'm going to slide my leg out behind me. I'm going to keep the foot on the floor. Inhale into the lungs. Exhale, then start the movement to lift the leg up. Inhale it down. Exhale, start the breath, then the movement. Inhale it down. Keep the head lifted. Exhale. Inhale it down into the lungs. Exhale. One more time. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale down. And exhale. Slide the leg back in. Okay, so you can see that when I start to exhale, I'm not doing it long before I start my movement, but I am taking that quarter of a second, half a second to make sure that I'm properly engaged before I lift the leg. It might be a bit of a longer breath for you, and that's fine, but make sure you've set yourself up with that foundation before you add any sort of load or movement to it. Your back will thank you later. Let's do the other side. Let's let the belly go. Let's exhale, give the baby a hug or pull up that tight pair of jeans. We breathe into the lungs now. Take a breath in. Exhale, slide the leg out. Inhale. Exhale, then start the movement. Inhale, lower the leg down. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale the lungs. Exhale. One more time here. Inhale. And exhale. Inhale down. And exhale. Close. And then I'm going to push myself back. All right. So I think we will end it there. I'm hoping that this was a good example of how to link the breath better to the core engagement and how to link the breath and the core engagement to the movement. I encourage you to take the time to practice the breath and the core engagement before you start one of the Pilates videos, or just take your time when you're doing the videos. The setup for exercises really is important, and once you have that breath and core or pelvic floor and abdominal engagement active and the idea of breathing into the lungs, every position that we do in Pilates will feel more stable. It'll feel more supported. And I think you'll find that your movement is going to start being more effective. You'll start feeling the movement more where you're supposed to feel it. We might be doing side kicks and maybe you're feeling it into your back. But if you haven't been setting it up properly and now you have a greater understanding of how to set it up properly, maybe you'll start to feel it a little bit more in your bum and less in your back. That's always the goal, right? We want to move efficiently, we want to move fluidly, and we want to move with ease. All right, thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out and contact me. I'm always happy to answer questions. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in our next restorative class. Bye.